All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a great podcast today. Me and the guest have been having a good conversation leading up to this. So right before I get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulty when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce AJ Franchi. AJ, for the people that don't know you, I kind of start my podcast the same way. I'm going to start it the same way with you. I want you to take it all the way back. I want to talk about AJ as a young man. Where were you born and raised? What was the family like? Did you have any siblings? Any defining characteristics about yourself as a child and like things that helped shape you? And then we'll build up to your story today.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I grew up actually right down the street in Novi, Michigan. So born and raised in Michigan. Spent my entire life in Novi. I would say the biggest defining part of my childhood probably was that my grandmother lived in the house with us for the majority of my childhood, right? So it was almost like having two mothers, right? And there was always somebody there, right, that could help and different perspective on things. And it was a really great part of my childhood, really great memory. She actually just passed away 2 years ago at 99, so lived a long life.
Good full life.
Yeah, good full life. Really, really, really long life.
And why was Grandma in the house with you? Grandpa had passed away and your parents stepped up, or what brought her into your life? Because that's awesome.
Yeah, so my mom was the youngest of four siblings, and my grandfather died when she was 18 years old. So I never actually met my grandfather on that side. And, my grandma, I think at the time was probably in her 50s. And, I think... I don't know if my parents didn't want her to be alone or, but she was at a point in her life where, she had been married for, over 30 years to the same man, and he died relatively young of stomach cancer. And, my parents, I think, could use the help with kids because we can all use help with kids. I just had a kid, and, fortunately my parents still live close. And so that's very helpful because they're a handful. But it was nice to have her in the house, and I think it was just a way to bring the family closer.
So you had a good childhood. You had good mentorship. Like you said, you almost had like two moms. You had two nurturing females that were willing to pour into you as a young man. When you were growing up, were you into sports? Did you have any certain loves? Like, what were the things that kind of defined AJ? If I got to meet you at 8, 10, 12.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up playing tennis, so I tried a lot of sports, wasn't good at most of them. Kind of latched onto tennis, did well at tennis. Played at the Sports Club of Novi, played in some competitive tournaments, played in high school. The other thing that I did in high school that I actually really liked and kind of got into by accident, but then started to shape my interest that even led down line in my career. Me and my friend actually started the robotics team at our high school, right? It's everywhere now. First robotics, today I go back and I'm at competitions or, I get asked to speak at events or whatever. And, it's a huge organization, but back then, we were team 503, which to give you some context, they're on team 18,000 and something now. And, it was a cool experience for us, right? It taught us what it meant to build something from the ground up and really try to generate interest, from peers. And, when we started in that program, I think we had maybe 12 people on the team in the first year. And, now I couldn't even tell you what the number is, but they basically, it's almost unfortunate. They have, tryouts, and not everybody that wants to participate can participate because there's so much interest. So it's been interesting to see what it's become. And it's always interesting to look at and see what it is today versus what it was when we started. And then, we even get some questions about, why is the logo the way it is, right? Because they've just seen it for so long where we're the ones that came up with it.
That's super cool. And that also gives you an incredible perspective. I mean, because I don't know if you know this or if you said it by accident, the slogan here is from the ground up.
Yeah, really? I didn't know that.
That's legitimately our slogan we talk about because we try to build people from the fundamentals all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
And it correlates to life, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you brought that thing to life, you brought that club to life at the school, you designed the logo, you were a part of the foundation of it. That is being an entrepreneur. That's what it's like to take a business idea or anything and bring it into creation. So you almost started to experience that as a kid, and through passion, you found something that you enjoyed, and then you made it a part of life, which is even better.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see it now too, because it's an unbelievable program, and I think it's an unbelievable program because a lot of people have taken the reins and made it that way, but I also think it did have a really strong foundation. And those early years, we had to fight to keep it alive, right? We had different teacher sponsors every year because, God bless teachers, right? But it's a lot robotic season's a lot. It's 6 days a week for 8 weeks, every night, 6 to 9, full day on Saturday. That's a big commitment, right? For a mentor and a teacher and a sponsor to be there with the students, right? It wasn't on site then, it is now. Now they have a whole lab. We were doing it at an automotive company that somebody rented out to us, right? So, but it had a great foundation, right? There was a lot of struggle in the beginning to get it up and running. And, I learned a lot of lessons from that, both in terms of just what it takes to bring people together and keep things going, what it means to be committed to something. And then also just, it was a great opportunity to experience STEM, right? Before STEM was cool, right? It's everywhere now. I don't think it was prevalent then, right? And so this is going back to 2001. Right. So.
And like I said, I'm sure your passion and willingness not to give up on the idea, and because there are challenges in there. You were just describing a lot of challenges. Yeah. You got to find other people that want to make a commitment that is serious. I mean, that's a lot of commitment out of people. But if you're passionate, passion kind of shapes and changes the world. If you got a group of people that are fired up about something, they can influence change. And you were a part of the founding group that made that a part of the high school. So while you're going through high school, did you have any idea what you're going to do in this life yet? Like, had you figured out any direction? Did you know you were going to go to college? Were you unsure? Kind of build me the mindset of, because we go through school, we're supposed to be getting prepared for life, but most kids come out of high school with that exact response. Like, I had no idea what I was going to do. Just talk about that period of life, and then right as high school is kind of ending, how do you transition in a normal life? Do you go to college, et cetera?
Yeah, I think, to be completely honest with you, I think I knew I was going to go to college, but I think I only knew I was going to go to college because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was the first one in my family to go to college, and my parents had encouraged it and pushed it, but I just kind of knew that as the, I guess as the route that everybody took or the most successful people took, and I didn't find out until, later in life that that's not even close to true. Right. And there's a lot of paths that you can take in life to get to where you are. And I mean, to be completely honest with you, when I'm looking for employees now, right. Cause I'm obviously in a position now where I'm hiring and looking to put people around me, and it's not even a question I ask. Right. It's just not something that's really important to me, whether or not somebody went to college. And, it's
I remember it was pushed differently, though.
Yeah.
Like, I remember even when I was growing up, it was like, if you want to be successful, you had better plan on getting to college and going to college. That was the ideology that was pushed.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I feel more like you. Like, when I would interview someone, I wouldn't even care. I care about the human being that sits across me.
Yeah.
If you've pulled your lessons from life and your people skills from life and you have organization, I don't care if that came from college or if that came from internally or it came from your family life or where, as long as you're the person, right? Like, there is a shift taking place in culture. And it's good to hear you say that as a president of a very successful organization and many other ventures, saying like, listen, kids, even if college isn't for you, we're going to judge you based on the people that you are and your ability to manage and handle the tasks within our company, not just whether you have a degree.
Yeah, we talk frequently internally about, the only two things you can't coach is attitude and aptitude, right? If somebody has a good attitude and has the willingness and the ability to learn, we can teach them how to do anything, right? And honestly, we do. Like, our company culture and our core value, really revolves around building people, to use your words, from the ground up. And, we have internal development programs, and, we focus a lot on how do we give somebody a career, because that career is something that they're going to care about and they're going to be motivated, and that's what's going to perform. If it's just a job, people tend to do the bare minimum, right? It's just a job, right? And, if you don't have the passion for it, that's okay. Find something you're passionate about, but we really try to identify that early on and drive that.
And if you're establishing an elite culture, which is what every successful business should want, is to produce an elite culture, a culture of winning, a culture of excellence, right? That comes down to the people.
Yeah.
Like, I would take good human beings with integrity and work ethic and resiliency and consistency over, someone that might have just credentials on paper. Yeah. I'll take the good person every single time, because I feel the same way. At the end of the day, you can build people to do tasks, but they have to want to be the people that are having all the characteristics that you would desire as a leader. You know, it's whether you refer to John Maxwell, you refer to many other people. Leadership comes from people and culture. It doesn't come from a piece of paper. Yeah. We can give you the title of manager all we want. You could designate somebody vice president, but if they're not the type of person that can handle that responsibility and that task and do it efficiently, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
Regardless of what college you went to.
And you need somebody too that wants to invest in themselves, right? And I think that there's a clear break between two different types of people, right? The people that want to invest in themselves and the people that, just want everybody to do it for them. And, I love mentoring people. We love bringing people up. But at the end of the day, they have to want to help themselves first. Otherwise, you won't be able to do anything for them.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's 100% true, man. And I've poured into some people, and I'm sure you have too, poured into people that I see potential in. And I've gone so far to be like, listen, you have what it takes. But then I had to at some point go, listen, they don't want to put the work back in. I've got to just take a step back. And you know what? If they come to me later on, life teaches them some lessons or smacks them around a little bit, then maybe they can be those people. But you're absolutely right. People have to want to step up to the challenge. So you're ending your high school career, right? What do you think is next for you? Do you what direction do you have? Or is it just kind of like, we'll figure this thing out as we go?
Yeah, so I decided to go to college, right? I had gotten good grades in high school, so it wasn't like some big challenge, for me to get in. I went to Michigan State University. I had the best 4 years of my life at the time that I had ever had, right? It was a great place to go to school. It was just far enough away from home that I felt like I was exerting a little bit of independence, but, still had, somewhere to go home to if I needed a break or, I needed an adjustment. So I went to college and, I made a lot of new friends in college and, changed my major a couple times trying to find what I wanted to do, decide what I wanted to do.
What did you originally go for? And then tell me some of those shifts.
Yeah. So my original degree was in journalism, right? So, and I did that mostly just because I was on the high school newspaper and I really enjoyed that. And I think the parts of that I enjoyed when I really think back on it was not having to be in class all the time. And not because I didn't like class, right? The class was fine. But, I liked that real world experience. I liked, talking to people. I liked, the challenge of a new project every once in a while. I liked doing something as opposed to just sitting there and like listening. I still like that to this day. I'm still, even in my career, I'm very hands-on. Sometimes I have to snap myself back and remind myself of what my job actually is because I like to get into projects. I like to have a defined end goal. And as the president of a company, you don't have that, right? And that's been a lesson that I've learned over the last four or five years now that I've been in that position is, what is the difference of that role and how do I need to adapt to that? Because prior to that, I was the CIO, right? I was working on technology projects, very defined deliverable, very defined, use case or product or project or whatever it was that I was working on, right? That I could see, that I could visualize, that, I could map out on a piece of paper. And when you're the president of a company, you can try to do that all you want, but like it's, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And the market's constantly changing and, you're dealing with people and people don't fit into a box, right? So it's been a much different role. But so that's what I originally went to college for, though, was journalism.
And it's probably made you grow tremendously because you have to then be
absolutely.
A person that is so, adaptable to change and can handle different stressors and conflict. And you don't have a laid out path. Yeah. You have to make the path.
Correct.
You're the one that has to say, hey, I don't even know if this is the right way, but we're going to follow this road for right now because I believe in it. That's an exciting career, but it's also very high stress.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you, I the way that I view it, and I've matured into this role a little bit is, I'm going to make 1,000 decisions a day. If I get half of them right, I crushed it, right? And you can't be afraid to fail, and you can't be afraid to, fail forward and learn lessons from poor decisions. And most importantly, you also have to be okay with that and comfortable with that as a leader, because if you're not, you're going to create an environment where people are not. And if you create an environment where people are not, it's not a good work environment, right?
100%.
There will be no innovation in an environment like that.
100%. So you switch your major around a couple times. Did you ever find anything while you were in college that did kind of stick to you that you're like, this is it? Or did you end up, finishing Michigan State and then like, how does life start to unfold for you? What's your first job out of college? And
So I did switch my major after my freshman year. I took some journalism classes, liked it okay, but as I got into them more, I realized that honestly, the majority of what that job is more editing, and I wasn't really into that, right? I liked talking to people, I liked interviewing, etc., which all sounded great. Found out pretty quickly that, that's kind of a thankless job, and there's not a ton of upside in that, or there's a very, very low likelihood of success. And so switched my major to marketing my sophomore year, and honestly just kind of got in a mindset of like, I'm going to finish this out, right? I like it. I want to get into business. My dad's in business, right? This seems to be where people are going. I'm going to finish college. I'm going to enjoy my experience, right? I'm going to get my degree to get my degree and to finish it. And then, I'll see where that takes me, right? And I'll decide what I'm going to do after. And so coming out of school, I finished in 4 years. I probably would have stayed 5 years if all my friends would have, but they didn't. So I finished too, and finished after that. And I graduated on May 5th of 2008. I started at Gold Star on May 8th, right where I am now. So no, excuse me, that's wrong. I graduated May 2nd, right, and started at Gold Star on May 5th. So basically, I finished school, had the weekend, started my career, never looked back.
Now, what was the connection there to Gold Star? Had you already had a friend in the company? Did you have, because you had referenced earlier before this podcast, you're like, hey, I had a mentor that I've learned a lot from, and he's really built me up in life. Yeah. What was the connection to Gold Star, or did that get built over time once you went to Gold Star?
No, yeah, that was my first real world life lesson was that interview. So I was looking for jobs. March of my senior year, I started looking. I was probably a little bit late starting to look because I think I was a little bit in denial that I was going to have to go into the real world, and I just kind of really liked college and was just kind of floating through. And I was looking for jobs primarily in Chicago because, again, just like my college experience, that was just kind of what everybody was doing, right? Like, hey, you're going to finish, you're going to go to Chicago, and you're going to have a good time, right? And, let's continue the party, and you can get a job there, and you can figure out what you're going to do. And so I did a couple of good offers. Now, keep in mind, this was, beginning of 2008. So hindsight's 2020. I didn't know what I was walking into at the time because I was just, a kid coming out of college. Not a great economy, was getting worse by the day. So fortunately, I didn't, accept those jobs in Chicago. I think for two reasons. I mean, one, honestly, I probably would have moved out there, taken the job, been fired like 4 to 6 months later because, that was just really happening, and I would have been the low man on the totem pole. But, also I think a defining moment for me, and when I met Dan, I was introduced by a family friend that was working at the company, and I was home one day, and they were asking me about, what am I going to do after college? And I was telling them I was looking for jobs, and they had just said, hey, you should talk to Dan, right, and see what he's all about. Send him your resume. So I remember I sent him my resume, hey, so-and-so, told me to reach out to you. He called me within like 3 minutes, which surprised me. I wasn't used to that kind of, speed.
Assertiveness.
Yeah,
he's like,
speed and return call. And he didn't call me to give me a job or anything.
No,
he called me like, hey, why don't you come in next week? I was like, okay. So it was in Ann Arbor, right? So not too far from East Lansing. And I think I was already going down there for St. Patrick's Day. So I was like, I'll go in and I'll check it out. And so I went in the first time to talk to Dan, and he told me a little bit about the company. And honestly, I didn't really know anything about the mortgage business. And but basically what he told me was like, listen, like, you can do whatever you want when you get out of school. What you need to focus on is there a job there or is there a career, right? And, here's the career that I can give you, and, here's where you can go, and here's what the business is, and here's what I want to do with this company, and do you want to be a part of it? And, so I went home, thought about it, talked to my parents, honestly decided it was kind of low risk for me because I was fortunate enough to be able to move back in with my parents in Novi. Post school. So, I wasn't going to have rent or any of that stuff. Positioning is important, right? Like it's, you can overcome anything, but obviously things like that help. Right. And so I was in a position to take a risk, right. And to kind of take a flyer on it and, give it a shot. And I just figured if I don't like this, right, I can always go get a job in Chicago in 3 months or go get a job somewhere else in 3 months. Right. So
when you're saying to take a risk on it, are you saying because you felt it was below the potential of what was out there at that one point? So you're almost like, I'm taking a risk to go with this company versus go to Chicago or one of these other things. Because like I'm seeing it as like you got a job opportunity. It sounds like from the owner of the company, which is a huge thing. Yeah. He's telling you about career versus job. It's like I'm seeing a lot of good. But in your mind, you have a perspective of like I'm taking a risk on this. Why did you feel that way?
Well, so I think part of the stuff that I left out was one, it was an internship. It wasn't a job, right? The wage was fair but low, right? I didn't know anything, so I would say it was fair, but not something that you'd be able to live on your own, for, right? And it was really an investment into myself, right? About, is this something that I really want to do, and do I want to learn? It was a smaller company at the time, obviously much bigger now, right? So I think it was, I guess risk is the wrong word. I don't know if it was actually a risk when you think about it, but when you're 21 and, you're coming out of college and all you've heard for the last 4 years is, go work at a big corporation, and you see your friends getting jobs at, Ford or GM or, Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever. It's just a totally different path to take, right? And so it feels risky. Turns out way better.
Great decision.
Yeah, it was a great decision.
You actually got invested in by the person running the organization versus being just a number.
Well, and I think that was an important lesson too, that in retrospect I learned, which is like you have to see the opportunities in front of you and then be willing to take them, right? Instead of just taking the safe route. And I mean that's what defines people's lives, right? And kind of where they go in life. And I had friends that went to big companies, and they've done well and they've done fine. Different type of life, right? They tend to move companies quite a bit, always looking for that next thing. It's just when you're at something from the ground up, like I was, right? And when you have that much internal mobility and that much opportunity, and as much as I've been able to be there as the company's grown and seen how it's grown and the institutional knowledge, it becomes a part of you, right? Which is good and bad. Right, it's good from the perspective of you can be really passionate about it. You can be a driver. It's going to make you very successful. It's the downside of it, if you want to consider it a downside, and it's all what you consider, is that it's very hard to disconnect from it. Right, it's very hard to not take things personally with it. Right, those are also the things that I think make me successful. Right, but it's very hard for me to separate personal life and Gold Star, because Gold Star is a part of me, right? And I'm a part of it. And it's largely defined, the last 15 years of my life, right? So good and bad, right?
No, that makes perfect sense. But I would, in my personal opinion, I'd always rather be on that side. I'd rather go all in for something than just be a number that's producing. Like, yeah, I'm getting a fair wage and da-da-da, but there's a million obstacles to be able to climb up. You were invested in by people, by a mentor in particular. Yeah. And therefore, you going all in has allowed you to rise through the ranks and really be an integral part of the company. You're the president of the organization. Yeah. From the kid that interned out of college on 3 days after. Yeah. They got a call from the owner. Like that's a really cool story. Yeah. What did you lightly alluded to this a moment ago. Sounds like you had a really good childhood. You had a good foundation for success. You created the robotics team in school. You got into Michigan State. So there's a lot of really good in there. What did your father do for work? And do you think that you had a really good role model, or you learned certain things from your father that kind of put you on the right track? Because I'm just hearing a story of a kid that you just kind of knew you were going to make it up the ladder. You might not have known how, but you had the confidence that you were going to make it. What did your father do for work? Do you think you pulled lessons from your father? And then we'll start going a little bit more into your rise through Gold Star.
Yeah. So my dad works at, and still works at, a company called LaPerry Foods. So they're a food distribution company in Warren, Michigan. And, I would say, I've definitely, again, in retrospect, I think pulled things from him. I've been at Gold Star for 14 years. He's been there over 30. Started there when it was, maybe 15 people, right before I was born. And, now he runs all of sales and mergers and acquisitions. I don't know. He does a ton of stuff there, right? He's worked his way up there as well. Really strong work ethic, right? I always saw him work. He traveled a lot when I was a kid. But was around too. It wasn't like I never saw him. But I watched him get promoted. I watched him have, a lot of success. He's a great people person. I will tell you, I was working at 12. I won't tell you where, because I wasn't supposed to be. That was because of him, because he did it too, right? And he didn't have the opportunity to go to college. That was, I think, part of why he talked about it so much for me, because he really wanted us to. He really wanted me and my sister to have that opportunity that he didn't have. But he was just really hardworking, right? Grew up his my grandfather, his dad was a immigrant from Italy and worked in the cement business. So, hard labor, hard work. And I think that's passed down. I don't do as much hard labor, neither does my dad, but I think he learned pretty early he didn't want to do that long term. But, I think from him, I learned a ton of stuff, right? But I think he's a great people person, and I learned pretty quickly how important it is to be that. If you really, if you really want to be successful in business, you have to be able to bring people along with you. Nobody does it. Nobody does it on their own, right? And the better your people skills, and the more that you can do that, and the more that you can get people rowing in the same direction, I think the more successful you'll be.
Let's start talking about you get into Gold Star Mortgage. You're on an internship.
Yeah.
You probably have certain perspectives on life and business and, your own level within the company and what you're being paid and all those things. I want to talk about like the young man that first joined the company and, you're going from a college education to real world experience. Now you're actually on the front lines and you're in an organization that sounds like it was very small when you joined.
Yeah, it was. So I was employee 74. To give you some context, we have over 500 people today.
It's scaled tremendously.
Yeah, it's grown substantially over the last 10 or so years.
So when you first joined the company, talk a little about your perspective on the company, what you're learning from the real world experience, just your perspectives and what you thought like, oh, this should be this or that. Just kind of walk me through that experience. And then when do you start getting noticed? And why do you start getting noticed? And how do you start getting noticed? Because to go all the way to the president of the company, even though you came in at number 74, that's a lot of people on the tier list above you. You are low man on the totem pole. You're the intern.
Yeah.
You're now sitting here as the president today telling me the story. Kind of build for me the perspectives, and let's drop some insight for other people is like, why you?
Yeah. Yeah, so the first thing I learned when I got there that took me a while to learn, probably too long to learn, was not everybody thinks exactly the same way I do. I think that's something you don't learn in college, and I don't think you really learn in high school. When you start working with people, you have to have and you have to learn to an extent a tremendous amount of empathy, right, and be able to understand, how they're thinking about something. If you really want to be successful in working with them, right? A lot of people never learn this, right? They have no empathy. They can only see, within their square box view of the world. And I think that largely holds them back, right? And I think if you really want to be successful long term, you have to be able to see things from other people's point of view. And so, that was probably the first thing I realized when I got there was that, man, I didn't really know anything, right? I didn't know anything about this business. I didn't know anything about, what it took to really make it successful. I didn't have a lot of context in terms of like what other people were dealing with in terms of, their personal lives and how that affects their work life. And, I learned, probably took me, if I had to guess, I would say like 1.5 to 2 years to really learn that. And I had a lot of guidance from Dan. And, the biggest thing that I learned and then had to relearn over and over again is, how much people really actually make decisions based on emotion, right? And not logic. And again, when you think about empathy, that's the most important part of it is you have to think about the fact that somebody is, what they're perceiving from you when you're speaking is directly correlated to how they feel, right? How you're making them feel either about you or with you or in the situation, and really doesn't have anything to do with the logic. So, that was probably the biggest thing when I started that, I just had no communication skills, right? Because I don't really think many people do coming out of college. I think that's something that you really learn on the job, but you really got to focus on that. And some people may be naturally good at, but I've yet to see one. I think, people have to learn that, and they have to be open to learning that. And especially if you want to ascend, the higher up you are in an organization, the more people you're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis, and the more people you need to be able to bring along with you. And so, that was probably the big thing,
So I have a couple points that I want to bring up, and I agree with you 1,000,000%. I mean, it goes back to the quote of like, people don't remember what you say; they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah,
that is so true because people are driven by their emotions. In psychology, that's called the Limbic System. The way that you feel is more likely to determine your actions than what you think, because we are driven by that biological response. When you're emotionally at something, that is your response first. It takes a lot of self-reflection, a lot of inner work to go, regardless of how I'm feeling, the correct response is this. A lot of people never get to that.
Yeah.
They can't stop outbursts. They can't stop these other things. And like you said, some empathy and some compassion and understanding like this person could be going through tremendous loss, tremendous heartache. and might just need a friend,
Yeah.
a mentor, someone to pick them up to then bring them back to the performance side instead of like the old management style of like scolding people and like threatening them like you're going to lose your job if you don't perform.
Yeah.
When you can connect with the human being, you have a way better chance of bringing them up than putting more pressure. They're already struggling clearly, or they're just someone that doesn't rise to the occasion. But you have to differentiate that. You have to differentiate between like, is someone struggling or do they not want to do something? Because that's totally different. The other point that I wanted to question into, because this is very inspiring to me, is it sounds like Dan is a true leader. It sounds like he is really investing in the people around him, because I'm still picturing this is the owner of the company that is taking the time to really provide this mentorship and this culture to all of his people. And that's probably why his program is so successful. And with there already being 74 people in the organization, you're getting one-on-one conversations and time with the owner. Like, he's not disconnected. You're not talking to him through secretaries. He's taking the time to mentor you directly, or are you indirectly learning lessons from his culture and company?
Yeah, no. So specifically, actually, the way that the program worked is that I was one of 3 in his office. So almost view it like a competition to see who was going to make it and who wasn't. Dan's always been very big and continues to this day to be very big on the fact that you have to be investing in people constantly, right? In order to really scale in order to really scale your business and your organization, and to free up your time to be able to do more of the things that you need to do. So I think part of it was, good timing for me, right? I was able to meet him and came in at a time when he was thinking about, how do I scale this business and how do I build it into more of just, more than just me, right? Driving the business, me being Dan at the time. And it's paid dividends, obviously, right? And it's been a lesson that, I learned because I went through it, and then, have built to replicate within the organization, both with my own personal team that is just around me, but then also with development programs within the organization, and just how we handle employees and how we view, opportunities and promotions and all that. We always try to promote from within, because at the end of the day, I can go outside and I can hire somebody with the best technical skills in the world, but I'm still going to teach them my culture, my service expectation, right? How to interact with the team and the people. And that's how you create a consistent experience, for your customers. That takes just as long or longer, right? And probably longer. And you have to find the person with the right attitude and aptitude, in order to really do that. So
You might be reiterating some things when I ask this question, but what is it that made you stand out? Because I didn't know there was 2 other interns, but obviously you stood out. Something about you was different, or he was willing to go further with. What do you think it was about you that made you?
It's 2 things. It's 2 things I just said. It was attitude and aptitude. I remember it specifically, right? I was willing to work. I was working a lot of hours. I was looking for ways to make things better. I was asking questions. I was trying to invest in myself, right? Anything that needed to be done, it was a yes. If there was something, that was outside of, I remember this is a little bit specific to mortgage, but, I used to clear post-closing conditions. That's not what I was hired to do, but somebody, they needed an extra hand, and I was like, yeah, let me do it. And I learned a ton doing that, right? So, again, I think the thing that made me stand out more than anything, I mean, I had a good attitude. I think I continue to have a good attitude, right? But I was willing to do whatever was needed, and I was asking for things to do, right? When I didn't have anything to do. And honestly, the other 2 guys just weren't, right? I was watching them not do it. I was sitting right next to them. I was like, well, you do you, right? And I'm gonna do this. And, it's how I learned the business, right? And then because I had this framework of knowledge, because I was doing so many things within the organization, just because I was asking to do them, it put me in a position when, big projects came along or big opportunities came along. I was ahead of the curve. I was ahead of the game. Like, I had a baseline knowledge that I needed in order to be successful in whatever I was doing next. I also, and again, I was fortunate because I was in a position to be this way, and I'll fully acknowledge that. But, I was patient, right? I was more patient than the other 2. I remember he gave us an option of when we wanted to leave his office and go onto the sales floor to sell, to basically sell mortgages, to become a loan officer. The other guys, I think they maybe left within 6-7 months, thought that they knew what they needed. And, there was obviously a big upside in terms of income, to go do that. I stayed 2 years in his office because the knowledge and the information, everything I was getting was invaluable to me. And, I wasn't like in a hurry because I was long-term focused, right? I was thinking about my career and what I was going to do and what I might be capable of. And we had those discussions a couple of times about, what does this look like long-term for me? And, it's paid off, right? I mean, everything you said it was going to be, it's been, and probably more. But I think that's the other big thing too, is I just had more patience, honestly. The other two, I remember they couldn't get out of there fast enough because they were just focused on that short-term paycheck, and maybe they needed to be, right? In fairness, right? I have no idea, but I wasn't, right? And I was able to do, I was able to invest in myself long term, and it's paid long term dividends for me.
I think you hit the nail on the head so well there, and I think there's a thing that happens to a lot of people where you don't give the appreciation for like the less tangible things. Like your paycheck may not be going up, but you are spending time with a CEO and a visionary and a leader and acquiring all these different skills, and you investing those extra hours towards projects. Let's say you're doing a bunch of stuff that you may not be getting compensated for, but you're acquiring skills. You're learning different aspects of the company. You're learning different aspects of business in general and people. You are gaining so much more than a lot of times people don't count those gains.
Yeah.
They count whether their paycheck goes up or down, or if they get to leave exactly at 5 o'clock, or if they're staying till 6. But it's like you had a perspective of, I'm acquiring so many different skills. I'm learning more about the business. As my competence rises, my confidence in this company rises. Yeah. I can handle more tasks. It makes sense. You had better perspective.
Yeah.
You were looking better at the big picture. They're looking at the little point, and you're going, wait a second. In the scheme of things, let's have a little patience. It's a virtue.
Yeah.
So you go from intern, and then after your intern role, what is the next step in the company? Like, what is the next jump you take? Is it a massive jump? Was it a little step? Kind of work me all the way, because like I'm sitting with the president of Gold Star Mortgage right now. How do we go from intern to that?
Yeah,
position?
absolutely. So, I started in May of 2008, and I was an intern, and I was doing all kinds of stuff. Right, I was getting gas, I was dropping off dry cleaning, I was picking up lunch, I was. This was before mortgage licensing was a thing, right? So technically anybody could sell a mortgage up until I think it was April of 2009 they instituted licensing in Michigan. So, I would take leads and, get on the phone with people and totally blow the call and then get some feedback about why I blew the call. And, again, though, but I was learning communication skills. I was learning how to talk to people. I was learning the business doing that. And then I remember it was November of 2008. So it was like right before Thanksgiving. And, it was right after Lehman Brothers had just gone, had basically gone under. They let Lehman Brothers fail. And, the market turned and a refinance boom started. And Dan came in and he's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. You're selling. I have this huge, database of customers. There's all this refinance opportunity that we need to capitalize on. Plus we need to service. The phone's going to be blowing off the hook. Right. You and I are a team. This is what we're going to do. It was me and him and a processor. And keep in mind, Dan at the time that he was the CEO of this company was also the number one loan officer in the country, right?
Wow.
And so, we had a big database, right? Big book of business. And so that was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I came in Friday, and I was the only one there. And then Saturday as well, after Thanksgiving, and just started calling, right? Started dialing, started talking to customers. And so rates fell, and that kicked off the first refinance boom. And so I got moved into that role. But again, it was just kind of do everything, because now this company, tripled in production in a matter of 3 months, right? So there was even more opportunity because there were so many, I don't want to say cracks, but things that needed to be worked on, right? To be able to adjust up to that kind of volume.
And it sounds like everybody else has like a real defined role within the company, and you had more of a flexible role.
No,
so
yeah, I was just like the guy, right? I was Dan's fix-it guy. Like, hey,
that makes sense.
I need help over here. Go over here, and AJ's going to come help you guys.
That makes a really dynamic position with like exponential growth potential, because you're not so fixated. It's like, hey, let's try this. Let's attack this.
And I think the biggest difference too is and I don't know if it's personality or just vision or what, but I embraced that. Whereas I think a lot of people struggle with that, right?
There are a lot of people that can't have like no task. They can't have like, you solve this problem. They can't have that.
And that's kind of the position I'm in now. I'm like almost back to where I was, where I'm not like necessarily the fix-it guy now, but I also don't have like a defined role, right? My defined role is pushing this company forward. That's my role, right? And so my every day is different. And if I pull back to my early career, it was the same thing. I learned that lesson very early on as well, especially, by like month 6, right? It was every day I was working on something different. Come in, this is what needs to be done today. We're going to do this. Then this is what needs to be done. And that's a small company, right? That's a small company mentality, and that's being in a small company. And to an extent, that role still exists in Gold Star. We're obviously bigger now, so there's a little bit less of that. I try to create that opportunity for people, but again, I was very fortunate in timing of when I entered the organization, because that's that small. It wasn't necessarily a startup. We had been in business about 8-9 years, but we were a smaller, growing kind of startup culture, and I was right in the middle of that, right? And so I did that for about a year, and then I remember at the middle of 2009. And again, keep in mind, my job's different every day as it is. A lot of mortgage companies, unfortunately, it started going out of business, right? The market got very tough. They had buyback issues. Some of their, lender partners were going out of business. It was a tough time for the mortgage business. Everybody remembers. Right? It was a tough time for people, right?
I actually bought my first house from the 08-09 crash, and it was perfect
timing
for me.
Good timing for you. Yeah, good timing for you. So there was a lot of money. I mean, that's the thing about markets, that everybody in chaos, there's opportunity. That's something that we live by.
I remember a lot of my friends and a lot of my family members were struggling in that period, and I was just happened to be early 20s, and I had some money, and I'm like, this is the best thing ever. So it's wild how even during crashes, there's great opportunity if you look at it that way.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I mean, chaos is what creates opportunity. If things are status quo, then there's just what it is. You got to really find it. But so middle of 2009, people start coming to us, and they need a place to work, right? At that time, the business was very fragmented. A lot of people own their own brokerages. It's actually similar to kind of how it is today, right? There's a lot of people getting back into the broker business. Markets are cyclical. It's always interesting to watch, things come back around. But a lot of people were coming to us, knocking on our door, like, hey, I need a place to work. Can I come work here? And I remember we were hiring people, and, we wanted to start opening branches and expanding. Dan had the vision to do that, but we didn't really have a central system of record. Like, we didn't have like a strong system internally to be able to see what was going on, especially if we were going to start to get spread out across the country, right, with different operations. And so I think Dan had the vision of, okay, this is where the business is going. I have a huge opportunity here, and I need technology or better technology in order to do this, right? Who's going to do that for me? Well, my fix-it guy, I mean, honestly, at the time, I was probably one of the only guys at the company that could, turn on a computer effectively, right? It was just, it was a different time, right? It was 2008. Computers were there, but not like they are today, right? Smartphones didn't exist, barely existed. I mean, we all had BlackBerries. We thought they were the coolest thing ever. So it was a different time. It sounds crazy now, but it's the truth. So I was pretty proficient with a computer. I was the youngest guy at the company. All right, we're going to get this system. It's called Encompass, which today I sit on Ellie Mae's advisory board. We've been on the system since 2000, and we launched in January 1st, 2010. We've been on it since. And he handed it to me and said, this is your project now, right? And that was probably the defining moment in my career that really led me to where I am today, because what it positioned me for was, 7 years, 2010 to about 2017. I took over as president in 2017, of working alongside individual departments within the organization, either that already existed or that were being created, because in the same time span, we were growing exponentially. So, we were transitioning from a small hybrid broker banker type organization where really we were just like sales driven, right? Just drive sales. Somebody else is handling the back office stuff for us, to full independent mortgage bank, right? So, departments are being formed that never existed before, like, pricing and secondary, like FHA underwriting. And because I was managing and implementing and developing and continuing to change and administer the technology system, I was working alongside those departments as they were being formed. And so it put me in a position where I became everybody's guy, right? Because now it's like I'm the subject matter expert on this platform that everybody has to transition to and use. some people liked that, some people didn't, right? But, again, you learned a lot of valuable lessons about how to talk to people. And yeah, I made a lot of mistakes along the way in that regard. And, but I learned the business by doing that, right? So all my institutional knowledge was because I was in each section of the business working hand in hand with the people that were responsible for it, because the system had to get configured to support it. And so, it gave me this great, almost accelerated opportunity where I wasn't on any kind of specific or deliberate rotation, right? I wasn't changing jobs every 6 months trying to learn all the parts of the business. I was just learning it because I was in the whole thing, just by a nature of what I did there, right? So it was very valuable, right? It was really a turning point in my career, and allowed me to both network, inside the company and understand what needed to happen. It put me in a great position to affect change and really improve processes, which, if you can come in and do that, people really start to trust you, right? So you have a lot of, credibility, right, from that perspective, because you're helping a lot of people along the way, and that's the best way to get, to gain credibility, honestly. And as a president of a company, that's the most important thing you can have. Is you have to have the respect of the people, because they have to be willing to come with you, and they have to be, willing to listen and see the vision and know that you can deliver, right? I know not every company is this way, but Gold Star is very much a culture of doers. Like, you don't get respect by your title. Nobody cares about titles, right? It's just not. We've never been that way. Dan's not that way. I'm not that way. And so it's really more important to be able to execute, to be able to work with people, and so that's all I was doing for 7 years. And we've been fortunate that we've had a lot of people that have been with us for a long time. So a lot of the people even that are on my leadership team now, or in leadership positions in the organization, were coming up with me, right? And those relationships really matter, right? Those relationships matter, to be able to problem solve and be able to work together. And again, to have that empathy, to know where somebody is coming from. If you have context and, experience with them, historical experience with them, it's a lot easier to accomplish that, right? So
100%. So that makes sense. You're facilitating growth, and you're helping to basically, you're the glue almost. You're like taking these fragments of this thing that's supposed to come together so that you can scale and you can grow and you can be successful. And you're kind of like linking the pieces more efficiently, right?
Yeah.
And then there is a trust for you there. You're making their job easier, you're making their process easier, you're making them more profitable, you're making them more efficient. So from all angles, you're probably getting respect. You would get respect from Dan. Yeah. Because you're doing it, but you're also getting respect from each individual specialist, because you're helping to facilitate change that's needed for everything to go up. At what point do you start to realize that? Do you even have any idea that you might end up becoming president of the company while you're going through this process?
Oh yeah, I think in fairness, that was the discussion that we had for a long time. There was never a time frame put on it, right? But that was always the carrot in front of me.
Okay.
Honestly, it was.
So Dan had brought that to you before, that like, hey, you're going to be kind of like my right-hand man, and if you go all in and we can learn this process together and we scale, like one day you could be president of this organization. Those words were said?
I think that's a little bit more eloquent. I think it was more something along the lines of like, hey, you have an opportunity, don't blow it, kind of thing,
Understood. But that still means the same thing.
Yeah, but same thing, right? I mean, it was the discussion of like, hey, I'm going to need a successor one day, and I need a number two. And I mean, we still talk about that, right? Like, who's, he asked me all the time, who's your number two, AJ? Who's your number two, right? Because again, you have to have that for the long-term health and security of an organization as well, right? There's a lot of companies that everything revolves around the one person, right? And what happens when that one person is gone? Or just what happens when, the organization is just too big for that one person to keep their hands around it, right? It just doesn't, that's not a way to build. We've been in business for 22 years, right? There's a reason, because, we've made those decisions, and, we invest in that, in people, and that time to make sure that, things can continue and it can scale appropriately. And so, I knew what I was working towards. I still had to, I still had to do the work and put in the work to get there, right? And make sure that I was the guy. And it took a while, and there was a couple others that came in and did it, before me. And If they would have worked out, who knows? Maybe that opportunity would have never been there, but it didn't. And, I learned a lot of lessons from them about what not to do. And I think that's another important thing that I think people don't focus enough on is they're always looking for somebody to show them what they should be doing, or they're always trying to emulate somebody or, mimic somebody or, do things the way that somebody else did it. And, the truth is that if you try to do that too much, you're going to end up being inauthentic, for one. And then two, like, you can pull just as many lessons from somebody, just things not to do. I learned plenty of things not to do from a lot of the people that I've worked with. And, and some of it is, man, that was a stupid decision and they just shouldn't have done that. And some of it is like, it works for them. It's not going to work for me, right? If I tried to do that, like, that's just not going to work for me, because you have to be authentic.
100%. And like you said, I mean, if your eyes are open and you're considering things from all different perspectives, you can learn from everything, from everyone. Like I mean, it's just in general, I can learn from my students out here. They ask a question in a way that I've never considered, and I'm like, wait a second. Oh, and then I understand a different perspective and I can answer things differently. And you can literally learn from everyone. That's a really good point. So during this whole process, you're probably all in on this company, man. It sounds like your life is Gold Star and Gold Star is probably your life. Like, you're all in and that's why you're doing well. How do you juggle family? How do you juggle personal time? How do you juggle, what does your home life look like at that point? Because that's a whole nother struggle. Just because you're crushing it there's an extreme stress that comes to, like, trying to make a woman happy during that process or raise a child the right way. What does that life look like outside of Gold Star while you're on the come up?
Yeah, so it was an adjustment. So I met my wife, my now wife, at the beginning of 2012. And so, I was about 4 years into my career. She was finishing up school at Michigan State. She's a few years younger than me. And, it was an adjustment period. I think when we were younger, she had her own career. She was working a lot too. I was working a lot. So it wasn't so much of an issue. I would say I've had to, when I became a dad, I had to relearn how to balance work and family life, right? Honestly, I mean, I was working a lot, but it was so much a part of my life that, she was a part of that too. And, she also, had her own things that she was focused on. And, she's very motivated and very, independent. So it was definitely not like she didn't have anything to do when I wasn't around. Yeah, very supportive. Yeah, very supportive. I mean, listen, if you marry the wrong woman, it'll change your life. Right?
Especially because, I mean, if you're trying to be all in, they have to understand that all in. They have to want you to be that passionate. They have to want you to be that invested. Otherwise, it turns into, like, you're giving all your time and effort to that and not to me.
Well, unfortunately, I was already that when we met, right? So it wasn't like this change that we went through.
Did you have relationships before that where that was a struggle, where you started going all in on your work life?
Yeah, I guess it was a struggle. I mean, there would just be a struggle because the relationship would just end very quickly because it wasn't going to change, right? Like they either were okay with it or they weren't, right? Like, it just was what it was.
This is my number one. I'm going to my dream. I'm
It really
going all
was.
in.
I mean, for my 20s, it was a lot.
I was
right?
the identical way.
Yeah.
Hey, this is always number one, even if that doesn't feel comfortable. But if you try to pull me from my dreams and my ambitions and my goals and my future, then I have to step away from you because I'm not going to step away from them. And then I found a woman like you're talking about that completely supported, like, I want you to be all in.
Yeah.
I want you to do all that.
Yeah. I mean,
but find the balance.
Yeah. And so I think I had to relearn that when we had our son. And honestly, fortunately, I had gotten to a point in my career where I was, I had put in that work before, we had kids. And so I wasn't trying to necessarily do them at the same time.
How old were you when you had your first child?
34.
Wow, I'm 34 now, and I'm just now thinking about my first child.
Yeah.
Same thing. I wanted to put the work in first.
Yeah. So it was just about a year ago. So my son Jackson is 15 months yesterday, actually. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
Bro.
Yes, thank you. So I know, but I've definitely had to relearn how to, or learn, I should say, how to separate them a little bit more, because kids changes everything, right? And I mean, listen, there's no secret to it. You have 1,440 minutes in a day. You decide how you're going to spend them. I started getting up earlier, right, is really what it is. I used to get up at 5. Now I get up at 4:15. So because I need that extra 45 minutes if I'm going to be able to do everything that I want to be able to do in a day. Because the problem is that when I'm at work, it sounds crazy, but I can't actually get a lot of work done because I'm, in meetings or, talking to people or whatever is going to come up during the day. So, my time to think, right, and my time to strategize and my time to define what I want to do has to happen largely outside of that 9 to 5 time period, right? And we do business on the West Coast. So 9 to 5 for me is 9 to 9, right? I'm getting calls, until 9 o'clock every night, right? And so, you have to be really good at time management. You have to find ways to manage your time. I don't think it's a unique story, right? I mean, I like documentaries. I like reading stories of other successful people, right? The 4:15 thing is, I was getting up at 5 and I just couldn't get everything done what I wanted to do, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then I watched the documentary about Magic Johnson, and guess what time he gets up? 4:15. And I was like, oh, well, let me try that. And I did it, and it worked, right? So it's, you can pull lessons from other people. It's like all of a sudden that extra 45 minutes gave me the time that I need to do whatever it is I need to do. And I'm not saying you have to get up at 4:15. You decide what works for you. My problem is that by the end of the day, I'm burned, right? So, sure, I can stay up until maybe like 10:30, 11 o'clock, but I'm not really going to be productive during that time period. My son's already, kids go to sleep at 7, right? So it's not like I'm spending time with him, but I'm very productive in the morning, right? I've always been a morning person. I like the morning, et cetera. So I had to shift, you had to shift your lifestyle and figure out what works for you. And it's worked very well for me. And honestly, I'm happier doing it because I feel like I'm now back to like getting to do the things I want to do. Not all work, right? Personal too, just being able to get to work out and that stuff. And, I've always been very scheduled, right? So I'm a self-scheduler because my career, my job doesn't set my schedule for me exactly. So I have to schedule it. And I kind of determine what my days look like and what I'm going to do. But it's just an adjustment that you have to make, right? And to really balance, it's, you have to be very deliberate about how you're spending your time and what you want to do and, what's important to you. And, you can't do everything, or if you want to do everything, get out of bed earlier. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but it's the truth, right? Like,
and I think you touched on an extremely strong point of just because you're busy doesn't mean you're anywhere near your maximum productivity.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
That's very different because I've had days where, I'm very busy. I go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And I go, man, there's a million tasks that I would have rather put my energy to today if I would have given myself an hour space that I could completely disconnect from any, because a lot of the work gets done in here. Mm-hmm. A lot of the work, I'm sure, that is the same for you.
Yeah.
The mind getting sorted out, making difficult decisions on different things, addressing, constructive criticisms that need to be, all of those things come from, you have to sort it right here first to then go out and handle it. So giving yourself that extra 45 minutes in the morning, all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is my time to be productive in the way that I choose to, versus the day will start to lead you. It's kind of what you were alluding to.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
the day grabs a hold of you.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're getting drug off going, wait a second, I got to get these things. That's huge.
Yeah. So
you found that pattern was really good for you. Another thing I wanted to address that I made a note about is you obviously have to do something to be taking care of your mental and physical health to handle being like a president of a company or things like that.
Yeah.
What are the routines that you do, whether it's reading or learning from mentors or motivational things or physical workouts? What is it that you do to keep yourself sharp?
Yeah.
Do you have anything in particular? Do you naturally just wake up?
I mean, I've always been, I guess I've been blessed with people. I mean, people tell me, at least, I'm pretty even keel. I'm not real reactionary, right? I tend to ingest, think, and then react, right? Pretty steady in terms of emotion. I mean, I definitely get stressed. I like my Peloton bike, so I'll hit my Peloton bike in the morning, and that's one of the things that I had to adjust because before I had my son, I was working out every single day, right? And I felt great, and I felt like I had that stability in my life. And then kids, just the first year is like you don't know what you're getting, and I don't know if there's a solution for that. You just got to deal with it. Just warning you, it just comes, right? It just happens. You don't know when they're gonna sleep. You don't know when they're gonna eat. It changes, and
as a scheduled person, you're like, oh.
Yeah, as a scheduled person, I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? And you just have to. And my wife would remind you, she's like, just the season of life, like it'll change. And she was right, it did change. So I think that was a big part of it, was just being able to being able to get back into exercising and have that time for myself. But that was where that 4:15 became so important, was because like I couldn't get it done if I didn't do that, because I had other things I needed to do too. It's little things, right? But what was happening was I was getting up at 5. I would do whatever work stuff I needed to do because that had to get done, right? I would, get done with that about like 6:15. Well, the problem is, kids don't wake up at the same time every day, right? So, some days my son would wake up at, 6:15, some days he'd wake up at 7:15, but what was happening was I would go to exercise, he'd wake up in the middle of it. It ruins your whole thing, right? And it's just, then that's like hanging over you. You didn't get to finish. I'm not somebody that doesn't like to finish it, right? So, then it just kind of sets you off for the day. So it's like, if I can just get it all done before 6, then, 6 to 7:30, whatever happens is going to happen, and I'm fine with it, right? Because then it's just like, I got done what I needed to get done. I know he's not going to wake up before then, right? Or likely won't, right? It was more mental than anything. It's like, I probably most of those days could have worked out, but I just didn't bother because I was like, he's probably going to wake up. I'm going to get interrupted. Forget it, right? Yeah, it's just like a mental thing, right? And, I think otherwise, I've been very fortunate, and it's taken me, a few years to get it. But I have a really strong team, that, I can delegate to, and that, can provide advice and, can help guide the direction of the company, because you can't do it by yourself. And if you try to do it by yourself forever, you're going to go crazy, right?
That's funny. The last part I wrote down on my note was delegate, because I was going to say, you're probably someone that's had to learn to delegate. You had to realize you can't handle everything.
Somebody told me very early in my career, you want to hire people smarter than you, right? So that's, if you're not smarter than me, then I don't, I don't need you, right? Like and so, I've focused a lot on that. And, I view my role in the organization more as like the head coach, right? I'm just trying to get everybody working together and pulling the same page and get the best people for each position. And, that makes if you think about it from that perspective, it makes your job a lot easier. And, but you have to be willing to let go of control, and you have to be willing to, trust the process. And, I'm very big on, sometimes it burns me, but most of the time it doesn't, is, I trust people until they give me a reason not to trust them. Right. And, sure, you can get burned sometimes, but I think you have more success stories than failures in that kind of mentality. And that really positions people also to kind of do their best work because they feel empowered to do it.
100%. I feel the same way on that. And I've had a lot of business coaches, like the old mindset people, that don't really think that way.
Yeah.
And they're like, play it safe, always contract, and I do the opposite. I do the same as you. I empower people, which actually gives you the ability to screw me over sometimes, because I'm empowering you to the fullest of my capabilities. But it also makes people that want to be a part of my organization perform to higher level of capabilities, because they see I believe in them. They see I'm eliminating obstacles that I can for them. Mm-hmm. So now, as the president, the company's growing. You said you're over 500 employees now. That's huge. You're a president of the organization. What does your vision look like? How do you continue the growth trajectory? What does Gold Star look like in 3 to 5 years if things continue to go well? Is it just, hey, we continue to build our culture and we scale as we scale, or do you have like specific goals in mind or benchmarks that you're trying to hit?
Yeah, so I think goals are important, right? So we have so we have a goal to get to $5 billion in origination, right? Last year we did $3 billion. So which, puts us at a, in all honesty, and for people that are listening, like a mid-sized lender, right? That doesn't make you the biggest in the country. I'm definitely not motivated to be the biggest lender in the country. That's not something that I care about. We want to be, a company that's been in business for 20 years and is positioned to be in the business for another 20 years. The thing about the mortgage business that I've learned just in, from what I've seen, and, if you look at history, there's companies that jockey for that top spot, right? I want to be the top lender in the country. I want to be the top lender in the country. And like, it's good. You got to have a goal, right? And that's their North Star, and that's what they're, but they are, and then they aren't, right? And it's, and honestly, a lot of companies that have gotten to that point have gone out of business, right? So, at some point for us, we just focus on how do we build a sustainable business, a sustainable culture, that people can have a long-term career at, can have a career trajectory, can have upward mobility, right? Can take care of their families, but also keep, an organization where we can keep our core values, where we know the people that work for us, right? Where we can maintain the culture, where it doesn't become corporate America and just, managed by only numbers. And not that there's anything wrong with those companies, and there's a lot of companies in our space that are like that. It's just not what we want to be, right? And, we for years have competed, doing things the way that we do them. And one of the reasons is because, we are very nimble, right? And I think, if you get too big, you become not so nimble, right? It becomes very hard to pivot. And, if you try to turn a battleship at 50 miles an hour, which is, what you have to do in the mortgage business, that's how quickly markets turn. A lot of people are going to fall off the side of that, right? And so, when I look at the outlook for the company and what we want to do, I mean, we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to scale because we need to in order to be able to provide the opportunities for people to continue their careers and continue their growth trajectory and the like. But that's really what's motivating it is the ability for people to continue to grow along with us. The number is just a number, 5 billion, 6 billion, 7 billion, whatever. You have to have something you're working towards. The truth is even that is, loan amounts go up every year, right? You're going to get there, just naturally at some point if you do the same amount of business because things just get more expensive. But for us, it's more about, how do we strategically grow at a pace that's responsible and that doesn't, grow on the backs of the people that we have, because that's very prevalent in our business as well. It just becomes it's a fight to the top in terms of production and then a bottom in terms of, profit. And it's like nobody wins in that situation.
That's awesome to hear, man.
Yeah.
We need more companies and corporations like that because that values people more.
Yeah.
That doesn't just put numbers over everything and get out of here. That's an investment in each other. Like you said, sustainability. It says we can have a profitable living, we can do well, we can grow, we can learn about this life, we can enjoy this thing. And, and we're a culture that you probably appreciate each other more than some of the things out there where it's just a cutthroat competition to the top,
Well, and if you really think about what we do too, and I think that's why it's so important for, why it's so important for us to maintain that core business and that core culture, right? Like we're a mortgage company, at a baseline, right? I mean, what's a mortgage? A mortgage is a commodity, right? Like everybody pretty much is selling the same money, right? The interest rates are pretty much, the same, right? Or close to each other. There's not a lot of differentiation in that business, so for us, like what we really view ourselves at and what we really try to be and what we talk about internally all the time is like we are helping families with the biggest financial decision and the biggest emotional piece of their entire life, right? And so we don't ever want to lose focus of that. And I think it's very easy to lose focus of that if you're just focused on, numbers and goals. And that's the worst part of banking is that it reduces people down to numbers, and like people are not numbers, right? Every mortgage that we write has a story at the end of it, right? It has a family that's moving and trying to get their kids, into school before the new school year starts, or, a family relocating across the country, or, somebody that, needs to consolidate debt so that they have money so that their kid can, play sports or whatever it is, right? There's a story at the end of every one of these. And, I think a lot of mortgage companies lose sight of that, and we try not to, right? And that's really what we talk about internally, and I think that's a big competitive differentiation for us, and that's what keeps people engaged, right? Because that gives them something to care about. Nobody cares about, a PDF. Nobody cares about that, right? Like it's this.
That's huge because actually I tried to get my last mortgage through Bank of America, and I had because I'm self-employed and I was trying to get a.
They probably shredded you.
I was buying a $750,000 home, and they basically looked at me and like the amount of work that it was going to take to get me qualified, and I'm like, man, like I have a $200,000 down payment, I've got this, that, and it was a literal nightmare to go through their process because there was no understanding of my situation. There was no looking at the growth. There was no. It was just pure, we're a massive, rigid corporation, and these are the exact standards that you have to meet, which I think I maybe could have got it done through them, but they wanted to approve me just below where I was at. I went to a different mortgage company, a local lender. Mm-hmm. Man, it happened in like 2 weeks. It was like bang, 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 boom, got it done, you're all set. Shook his hand, he gave me a bottle of wine at the house. He looked at the human being and the story and the reputation and my, he went further into my bank statements and was like, man, you can definitely do this more.
Yeah, I mean, the job itself is problem solving, right? I mean, again, people do not fit into boxes, and that's getting more true, not less, right? And I think you see a lot of the mortgage industry kind of going the other way, right? In terms of, automation and everything that's happening. An
algorithm just says whether you can do something
exactly.
or not.
And I just don't think that's going to exist. Our piece of the business will exist. I think that we can carve out a niche for ourselves. But again, that's what drives the culture of the organization is like, how do we help people, with this?
Where does the power reside at Gold Star, though? Because are you limited on the decisions you can make based on like national lending laws or like, because I don't really understand the world that well, or do you have flexibility to make decisions? Because obviously it's risk, right?
Yeah.
It's risk versus reward. You're trying to look at, and you have to look at some things very objectively, but you might consider other things. Where does the power lie? Like if you, as the president of a company, if someone didn't qualify on basic standards, are you able to make a decision that says we qualify, or how does that work? Because I don't understand the intern.
Yeah, I mean, so everything is based on secondary market liquidity, right? Very few people actually hold their own paper or lend their own money, right? Everything goes into bonds that are sold on Wall Street, and then that's what keeps the machine turning. And something like 92% or 93% of all loans in the country are securitized by one of the three agencies. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or Ginnie Mae, right? One of those three. There's guidelines, right? And guidelines are, again, people just don't fit into boxes. And so sometimes you have to, look at a situation, look at a person, all the way around and determine, what does it look like is happening here? What can be proved? And, it's hard to explain without being in the process, but I think experience matters. I think that, people have stories and you need to be able to tell that story effectively. And I will tell you, the agencies, right, that are buying this paper and that really manage risk, right, their core mission is home ownership, right? So they want you to find, ways to lend people money, obviously within the law and within, guidelines, right? You don't want to be making, really risky decisions on people, right? But the company is also the front line about what is this person? What does this look like as a whole? And so I just think experience matters. And I think mindset about, how do I have like a no mentality? Am I just going to look for a reason to not make this loan? Or, is there a way to make this deal work? And again, packaging and matters as well, right? And maybe, let's say you were talking to a loan officer. A loan officer packages a loan for you. You take an application. They give you a product, right? And then you get denied, right? Well, maybe there was another way to do it. And if they just don't take the time or the energy, or the underwriter doesn't take the time or the energy to figure that thing out, like, you're not going to be able to solve that.
That's not a hypothetical. Right. That's exactly what happened at Bank of America. Exactly. I took the identical paperwork and same story, same person, same revenue, same everything to another person, and it got approved. Done deal within 2 weeks with a better interest rate than what I was getting from Bank of America.
And so that's the business, right? I mean, the business is like, how do you tell a story? How do you put somebody into the best position for themselves? And how do you make sure that you're a professional and you know what's going to work? And, because again, it isn't just like push button, get mortgage. That's what people think happen. Like that is not what happens, right? And so, it's important, right? It's important to have people that start with the right mindset of like, I want to help this person, right? So that they do everything they can to help that person.
You're in a problem-solving mindset. You're going to try to look at a situation without being overly, drawn to risk.
Of course.
But you're going to problem solve.
Correct, yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, you said markets are cyclical, right? Mm-hmm. We've been on the up and up and up and up for a long time now. Like housing prices, all these things. Like, I mean, when I just tried to buy this house, I got outbid on 5 or 6 homes. I'm talking like cash offers, same day. Yeah. It was insanity. I couldn't believe. And they're all about around the $500,000 mark. Yeah. I'm talking market, a house hit the market on a Thursday. Me and my fiance would look at it on a Friday. It was bought, done deal, finished on a Monday. Yeah. And I was going, this is insane. Yeah. And then we went up a little higher and higher, and the competition got a little bit less. And then we actually got like our dream home. But do you see an impending, like, I'm speaking to a man that's at the very top of this organization. You're a president of a mortgage company. Things to me have seemed like they've gotten out of hand. And I just bought my new home May of last year. Mm-hmm. So I witnessed this kind of frenzy and this steadily climbing.
You're talking about in terms of home prices.
Yes. The market in general. And if a market is cyclical, do we not expect to see a huge crash again? Like, hopefully not the 08, 09 thing, but things do happen in cycles. Do we expect this?
Yeah, no. So I give presentations on this all the time. This is actually a great question. I wish I had my charts in front of me.
I'm super excited to hear this answer.
Because it gives a much better viewpoint. But no, there's a couple things that are driving home prices right now, right, and have driven them to the levels that they are. And I think that it was exasperated. Some of the appreciation was exasperated by COVID and some of the migration out of the cities and People realizing that, maybe they wanted something a little bit different in a house or bigger in a house, or they just even wanted a house because they didn't want to be cooped up in their apartment. But in general, if you look at a couple different statistics and you kind of put them together, they tell a really interesting story. So the first one is new household formation, right? And so I'll give you differences between 2006 as an example, which was like the start of the downturn of 2008 that everybody remembers, and this colossal drop in home values, right? And then where we are today. So the average household, and I don't know the exact numbers, the charts express it much better, but the average household formation starts at 33 years old, right? So the first time you said you just bought a house. I don't know how old you are exactly, but
34.
You're 34. You bought it at 33. There you go.
Correct.
You're the statistic, right? So that's the average first-time home buyer in this country.
No. I bought my first house at 22.
Okay.
This is just my most recent
Your
house.
most recent. Well, then never mind. So, but the average first-time home buyer, 33 years old.
I had no idea.
That's what they call. Yeah, that's what they call household formation, right? So, new households forming, maybe new family, people have kids, whatever it is, they need a house, right? So
the people are renting before that, living at home, doing other things. Like,
yeah.
I remember as soon as I could buy a house, when I was 22 and working at the dealership, I got a loan. I was like, I want to own a home.
Yeah, I think people rent, people live with friends.
So the average age is 33.
33 years old.
Did not know that.
Across the country. So if you back up 33 years of historical birth rates, right? And so in 2006, when the housing crisis started, or was like kind of on its cusp, right on the bubble, you go back to 1973, you had the lowest birth rates in about a 15-year period from 73, 74, 75. And there was a couple reasons for that. You were the biggest one though was Roe versus Wade, right? So you had this adjustment, I guess, in the culture around abortion and contraception and everything else. And so just coming into the market in 2006, right? If you look back, you were on a declining birth rate trend of people turning 33 years old now, 33 years later, right? So you have less new household formation. You also had an abundance of new construction, like outpaced like 3-1 for new household formation, right? So you had an unbalanced market, right? I don't know how it got there, but that's where it was, right? The statistics don't lie, right? And so if you have an unbalanced market, you have more supply than you have demand, right? Then it was going to happen regardless, without power option arms, without any of that stuff, right? The market was just unbalanced. And so, you had, when the recession hit, you had this huge decline in home values because of it. But if you look back at recessions from like the 1920s until today, there's been probably 7. That was the only recession where home values decreased. In every other recession, home values were either flat or increased at, the average appreciation rate is, 4 to 6% a year, right? And if your time horizon is long enough, right, even with that drop in value in 2000 and 2008, I mean, first off, even if you bought your house in 2005 and then it lost a tremendous amount of value in 2008, if you still have it today, even if you still had it 2 years ago, right, that appreciation had come back, right? But I also think that the birth dynamics are much different now, right? And so are the building dynamics. So since about 2016, we've been in an inverse imbalanced market in the terms of we've had increased new household formation every year based on historical birth rates and new 33-year-olds, right, for simple math, entering the market. And you've had continued periods of low build, right, low new inventory coming to the market. Not to mention you also have aging inventory, right? Or the inventory that you have is aging, meaning the houses were built. I mean, how many houses do you know built in the 50s and 60s and 70s? Like that stuff's just going to age out, right? It's going to fall apart at some point, or have to be renovated or built back up. So you've had an unbalanced market now in the inverse since about 2017, and that's getting worse, not better, right? We're on an uptrend again of historical birth rates and new people entering the market. You've got aging inventory that was built before. You've had low periods of build for about the last 6 or 7 years and really like 10 years, right? Because you really just had a balanced market from like 2011 to about 2015. And then 2015, the market got out of balance where you slowly had more new home buyers coming to the market than new inventory being completed. And that got worse and continues to get worse and is probably going to continue to get worse because you have continued challenges around building, right? Increased labor costs, increased, materials costs, longer time. So I say all that to kind of paint a picture of,
It sounds like it's a completely different dynamic.
yeah, it's a totally different dynamic than 2008. And even if you do enter a recession, I don't think that you're going to have a decrease in home values like you did in 2008 for that reason. I mean, just simple supply and demand. And then also, I think the dynamics around home ownership are a lot different now too. People are far less likely to let their primary residence go, right? And because they need somewhere to live. And so, it in 2008, a lot of what was defaulting. I mean, some people, hit really hard times, and there was definitely primary default in that market, but it was a lot of investment properties, second homes. It had just gotten so out of whack, right? And that's part of the reason that the new household completion versus the new household home ownership wasn't noticeable right away. It's because people own 3 houses, 4 houses, right?
I never even considered the birth rate too as a massive factor, but which makes me think forward thinking. Like right now, we're having some of the smallest birth rates ever compared to like human history. Like the birth rate is going down tremendously. So maybe in 20, 30 years, they may be a huge problem of you at one point in time with the baby boomers and all these things. I've even heard it argued that the population of the world right now could start to decline over the next 20, 30, 40 years, which would create an extreme influx the opposite direction. But we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah.
We're seeing more people looking to purchase. Building has slowed down. It's kind of balanced out what caused the initial thing. So you don't really see it tying in at all. You think things are going to, even if we have a crash and we have a market pullback, because a lot of markets are up.
I think we'll likely be in a recession, beginning to middle of next year, but I don't think that you're going to see a substantial impact on home values.
Got it. I actually thought a recession is coming as well, but I like the perspective that you don't think the home values are going to change very much. And honestly, it makes sense. It is owning a tangible asset.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What do you think is going to lead to the recession in general? Just the fact that we've printed, $6 trillion. And I think I heard a statistic that post 2020 and after, like 80% of the United States currency that has ever been printed has now been produced. Like it's something insane, the amount of money that we've printed and the spending that we've done. What do you think leads to the recession that's upcoming?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the biggest thing that's going to lead to the recession that's upcoming is that they're just going to have to force it to slow down inflation. They can't allow inflation to continue on the path that it's on. And from that perspective, everybody said this. You hear people say in the news like the Fed missed the boat. I'm not sure there's anything that they could have done. I mean, if you looked at the amount of money that was pumped into the economy during the pandemic, and the amount of new money that was put in and stimulus money, and I'm not even just talking stimulus to individuals with like increased unemployment and maybe some of the payment credits, things that people got. I mean, yeah, that was a lot, but there was also a ton that went into businesses and market stabilization and all that stuff.
It was insane.
Yeah. They have to start pulling that out. I mean, that's what's causing inflation, right? And you can't let inflation to continue on the path that it's on because it's really hurting people, right? And it destabilizes it. It increases the wealth gap in the country, and that has longstanding impacts on society, right? So I think at this point, it's probably a foregone conclusion, that you're going to be in a recession, because if you think about what a recession is defined as, it's just a slowdown in growth. Well, I mean, growth's been so substantial, right, over the last 2 years
100%.
because of the amount of capital. Because of the amount of capital that's been pumped in and how cheap it's been, I don't think it has anywhere to go but slow down, right? At this point, I don't know how it continues, right? Because that was just such an unnatural environment, because of what was going on with COVID.
With our response to it.
Yeah, with our response to COVID. And so, and if you look back historically, we've kind of been here before, right? I mean, obviously not coming off of a pandemic, but you can see, you liken it to like the 1970s where, Arthur Burns was a Fed chair, and Arthur Burns basically said that, inflation is transitory, and, turns out that it wasn't. And so it kept skyrocketing. And, what fixed that? I mean, Paul Volcker came in and raised the Fed funds rate from like 11% to 20%. I'm doing this off of memory, so check my numbers. But, overnight, he had to dead stop the economy to stop inflation. And there was a couple painful years, but again, recessions are a natural part of the economy in general. And again, you've seen this repeatedly over the last 40 years. This is the highest inflation it's not the highest inflation has been. It's probably the second highest inflation has been. But I guess my point is I don't think they have a choice at this point, right? And I don't know how else you stop inflation, especially when you also have all of these other outside factors and supply chain issues and now what's going on in China with COVID and how that's going to affect the supply chain and everything in Russia and the Ukraine that's impacting oil prices on top of these other issues. I think that they have to. And so, you'll see them continue to raise Fed funds rates to a point where they can really slow down demand. And I mean, that's what a recession is, right? Is really that, is just a decrease in growth. And so
What do you think regular people should do or could do to like prepare for things like this? Because a lot of people are starting to talk about it now. We all kind of have the impending feeling that it's going to be here soon. Advice to just people that are, trying to live their lives, provide for their families, that are nowhere near the level that you're at. What do you say to kind of prepare for this upcoming thing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's easy to say live below your means, but I mean, that's the best thing that you can do to prepare, right? Is not overextend yourself, not over lever yourself, right? Make sure that, you're somewhat living within your means. And I mean, listen, a lot of people don't do that, right? We see a really good financial picture in a lot of people, and just based on the business that we're in, but that's the best thing that you can do to prepare. Diversify assets, look for income generating assets that will continue. Because again, I think housing will remain strong through this recession. And so, your home is your asset, but that's really all you can do. Right. I mean, it's
So the final part I want to talk about on the podcast, because we didn't bring this up at all, but before we were talking, you hired an assistant, and you were like, you lit up when you talked about it. You're like, listen, Sarah is spectacular, which for people that climb the corporate ladder, a lot of the times being able to disconnect becomes next to impossible, or being able to really manage things that full to your capability become nearly impossible, because you want to be so hands-on. You want to be the guy that's pulling all the strings. And you hired an assistant. You said she has been tremendous.
Yeah.
What did you find in her? Because you said you interviewed multiple people. Mm-hmm. How did you pick her, and how has it helped you as a businessman and as a...
Yeah, so I mean, an assistant probably isn't even a fair title, right? I mean, she's more like a right hand to me now. And I mean, really what I was looking for and what I found was somebody that compensated for all of my weaknesses and the things that I didn't do well, right? So, I'm not super detail oriented. She is, right? I actually am not super assertive. She's pretty good at that, right? She can be, in a good way, right? To really, let's get things done. Let's move forward. Let's get these people going. So I think, it's just another example of like, you need to hire people smarter than you. You need to hire people that, have the qualities that you're looking for. But I would say the biggest thing I think that she's really excelled at is that she is very much able to identify things that need improvement, and then she just does it. Like, she's just a doer, right? She doesn't wait for me to tell her to do things. She's open to feedback, and she's made my life a lot easier, and not even making my life easier, but there was just so many things that I wanted to do around events and even things like this, right, that I just didn't have the bandwidth to do, and she brings that bandwidth, right, and allows us to focus on things like this and things that are important to the business. And so again, I think it's really important to find somebody that you can work with, but also that can kind of be a work partner for you that can complement
and challenge you. It sounds like a little bit.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. A little bit of yin
to
your yang, and make
for sure.
it. And that's good for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's that's really important, right? When you're looking for people.
So anyone that's listening to this podcast and they're like, man, like this has been a phenomenal story. We like the vision. We like the company. Whether it was someone that wanted to reach out to your company for maybe seeing if Gold Star has a spot for them and they think there's someone that would fit in, or someone's looking to get a new mortgage, just give me a kind of rundown, the best way to contact it. Do you just I don't know anything about contacting Gold Star. How would I do that? Like, give me basically a pitch.
So there's a lot of ways to do it. I mean, I think the easiest way to get in touch with us is, you just go to goldstarfinancial.com, and there's a web form where you can tell us if you're looking to buy a home, refi a home, you just want to talk to somebody. All of those inquiries actually come directly to me because I like to see what's coming in, and then I distribute them accordingly and make sure they get to the right place. That's kind of how it works. So that's probably the lowest tech thing we have in our organization, but it actually works pretty well because it keeps me plugged in. So, that's really the best way to get a hold of us. Our phone number is 800-201-LOAN, so you can call that at any point as well. but again, we're fully available on Instagram and Facebook and, all the social channels also.
So the last thing I want to talk about is you're a very charitable organization. You guys back a lot of things. I mean, we've only really talked about Gold Star, but you're involved in several businesses. You support the community. You're people that are giving back. You know what I mean? And you don't have to. Those are decisions that your company has made. So let's talk a little bit about some of the ventures that you guys are in outside of Gold Star, like the charities that you back, or the ventures that you or Dan take on outside of the direct mortgage company, because I know there's a lot to you guys are very multifaceted, and we've kind of honed in on one aspect.
Yeah. So our probably the biggest charitable organization that we support is VetLife, right? So I actually sit on the board of VetLife with Josh Parrish, and so I met Josh a few years ago, and he kind of outlined his vision for me and how he wanted to bring education around veterans benefits to the community. And originally when we were talking, he needed a mortgage partner just because he was telling me about some of the poor mortgage experiences that he had and, what he had seen when he was in Department of Veterans Affairs about how veterans are guided and not really even understanding the benefit, because the VA home loan itself is a great benefit and a great opportunity for veterans. And again, the number one way that people build wealth in this country is home ownership, right? It's the biggest asset for almost everybody. And so, he was really passionate about how do I bring this benefit to people, and how do I know it's working with somebody that I trust? And he was referred to me, from somebody that, knew our organization. And I got eyes on the organization and kind of what it was doing and how it was helping the community and what the vision was. And our first year, we sponsored a bid and then really upped our sponsorship in years 2 and 3, and then going forward, not only monetary, but also in terms of resources, right? Because again, you need a lot of people to really, make a difference and really be effective. And I have a lot of people, right? I have a very charitable organization and people that are willing to volunteer and help and, support the community. We have veterans within our organization that want to be a part of it. And so charitably, that's probably the biggest organization that, we're the most involved in, just because we really believe in it. And we see firsthand, we have plenty of veterans that come to us for loans that, went somewhere else, got led astray, or had a bad experience, or whatever it is. So we see firsthand how underserved that community really continues to be. And that's something that, from a business perspective, we're trying to change. But then also from a charitable perspective, we're trying to change. In terms of other businesses, so Dan is also an NHLPA certified agent. So we have an agency that represents hockey players, in the NHL and leagues below that as well, basically throughout the entire hockey community in both Europe and the United States. We have 2 apiaries, which are bee farms down in Florida that, bees are obviously an endangered species. They're also, vital to the food chain. And so the whole premise of that business is, how do we sustainably raise bees, in a healthy way that can be distributed across the country to help pollinate crops. We make honey and those kinds of things, and then also do some educational things with universities around, around bee populations and that environment. We have most everything else we're probably just equity partners in, right? So we're not really the operating principals in those businesses, but
you're in other avenues as well.
Correct,
so I mean, it's awesome. And you guys are really diversified in what you're doing. But a lot of the things, there's a common theme. You're trying to make an impact.
Yeah. And even in the equity stuff, right? I mean, the equity stuff, it's always when we're looking to invest in businesses, we always look at the, who is the person, right? What are they trying to accomplish, right? We invest in people, right? I mean, first and foremost, we're investing in people. And so we can only be in so many places at once, but, how do we continue to, drive the businesses forward? I'll give you a great example. We met a gentleman about a year ago that was looking for capital. He wanted to start a electric vehicle rental company, right? So it's all Teslas. And, obviously he wants to make money renting cars, right? That's the baseline of the business. But the the business is really about so much more than that. It's how do we drive awareness to electric vehicles as a way to, lower emissions, and, he's planting a tree for every rental that comes along with it. And so it's in Resorts World in Las Vegas. It's called Evolve EV. So, we're partners in that business, and we help, we helped fund it to get it started. But again, I think that business was really, unique in terms of what its service offering was. And then really we invested in the guy that was starting it, right? He had a great story and a great, idea for a business and great drive and passion for it. And so we really focused on that.
No,
as
that's
well.
awesome. You're investing in a vision and something that is actually impactful more than just cash flow. There's
Yeah.
a million things that get cash
Yeah.
flow for you guys. There's a million things. But you're like, no, we see something here that is a fundamental change, or at least a change in the direction that we believe in, that
Yeah.
we want to be a part of, that we think is, a better future. That's awesome. So do you and Dan just look for opportunities all around, or is this like when it comes to you, you find it, or are you actively always on the lookout for how do we find the next, area that we expand to? Because you're extremely diversified already.
Yeah. I think we're always looking, but I think we also get solicited frequently, right? We know a lot of people, right? And we're very big, and Dan taught me this very early in my career. It's like, always take the meeting, right? You never know what you're going to hear, and you never know what you're going to learn from it. We'll always take a phone call, right? Just to see, listen, nobody's too good for a phone call, right? I know you read books and everybody says like, you have to protect your time and what's your time worth and all that. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But, the truth is that you don't get anywhere by saying no, right? And there's no progress ever made with no. And so, you take the phone call, you listen, you see what it's about, and, you never know. I mean, even if there's not an opportunity, maybe you learn something, right? And so that's how it's been so far.
And the person that probably is already thinking no misses a million opportunities versus you have the ability to say no at any point.
Yeah, correct.
But by having that meeting, you might stumble upon something where you go, this is really good.
Yeah.
This is something we do want to be a part of.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, man, this has been just a killer podcast today, AJ. If there's anything else you'd like to capture in this moment in time, any message you'd like to put out to your employees, your company, to your customers, just anything that you'd like to capture in this moment in time, we'll throw it on here and then we'll wrap this podcast up, man.
Yeah, so this is what I've been telling people lately because the mortgage market and the overall financial markets are a bit in chaos. And I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. It's, when you're in markets like this, and especially in our business, and there's a changing landscape. I mean, you just have to remember that there's opportunity in chaos, and you have two options. You can either play offense or you can play defense. And so, you make that choice and you go forward. But, it's the hard times and the tough times are when really great companies are built. And so, for anybody, especially in business, that's thinking about that, that's been my experience, and that's what we think about.
I like it. Extremely positive mindset. You're a product of culture. You
Yeah,
say, listen,
there you go.
Tough times might come, but we'll find a way to be winners. When you're a winner, you win in the rain and the sunshine. You win when things are good, and you win when things are bad. And you might have to come back to your core values. You might have to really pull your team in together. You might have to take a step back from some of your plans that maybe get foiled when, things change. But when you have that culture of like, we're going to get through it, you can get through anything.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Man, it was a pleasure to sit and speak with you today, and, we'll wrap this thing up.
Great. Thank you.